Okay.
So let me just jump into this.
Okay.
Hey everybody, thank you for coming and following. And I'm gonna level with you. This is the second time I'm recording this. I've got Dean Meadows here. Hey Dean.
Hey, what's going on?
So we recorded for an hour.
And we crushed it.
It was such a good conversation. And it's gone. It is just gone. So Dean is being kind enough because he drank enough coffee to jump into this conversation. Dean.
Yeah, there you go.
I am buying you dinner when you come to Austin next.
Sounds good.
I sincerely, or I'll get you another one.
Chris, it is.
I heard they have good fries. We can share a fry, right?
They do have good fries.
Okay. So, here's the conversation I want to catch people up. First off, I want to say, I'm Eric Murphy. Thank you for coming to my channel. Thank you for checking out the show. Normally I've been doing Murphy's Law, where I go over calls to call-in shows with other hosts, and I've been saving Fridays for apologists. I've been talking to Dr. Randall Rouser the last 2 weeks, where we talked about properly basic beliefs and objective morality, but I kind of want to get away from that, cleanse my palate a bit, and go back to my favorite apologist, Dean Meadows. Dean, you're awesome. Before we dive in, who are you?
I'm a Christian apologist, executive director of the Daily Apologist, 501c3 that does social media apologetics.
Awesome.
There you go.
Dean, one of the reasons you are my favorite is because you have been exemplifying on the other side what I want to see. And I want to see raising the bar on discourse, recognizing the humanity in the other person, and fervently disagreeing on the ideas, but doing so in a way that can try and be as productive as possible.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in the comments people are going to say, but it leads to so many dangerous things. You know what? When we're talking about philosophy, we need to engage empathetically, and we need to engage charitable listeners. We need to be charitable with each other. That's the only way we're going to have this conversation, is if we assume the best and leave the other person to let us down. Dean, you have not let me down so far. So here's what I don't
plan on doing it anytime soon.
Good. So we have been talking about the Kalam cosmological argument. It is Dean's Jammy Jams. If you want to see the episodes of us talking about it before, you can go up over there. I'm going to put a little link up above Dean's head. Let me know if that works. But as the channel is growing, things are getting crisper, they're getting cleaner, and I want to revisit some of these ideas because there are some things that I've just been stewing on because it just doesn't make sense to me. So in the effort of keeping things quick so we can get onto the topic, Dean, do you want to present the Kalam, or do you want me to?
Of course, I would love to present.
Of course you would love to. Go ahead.
I would.
This is Jammy Jams.
Yeah, so the Kalam basically is a deductive syllogism that goes like this. 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore the universe has a cause. And then from there, you do conceptual analysis and you come to the conclusion that it's the description of God.
Okay. So tonight, I'm going to leave these premises alone because I don't think on conceptual analysis you could possibly get to the descriptors of God that you say you can.
Okay.
And what we had talked about in our conversation that no one is ever going to get to see. I am so sorry
Only left to
everyone
us to know.
Right? It was beautiful. While we talked about that, you had said that God has all of these qualities, and in those qualities that would make God uniquely suited to be the creator of the universe. And so my first question is the same question that people have in Philosophy 101 when they hear this argument, and that is, if God created everything, who created God?
Yeah.
And your statement was, or is,
nobody created God.
Okay, so if nobody can create God, then nobody can create nobody has to create God, then nobody has to create the universe, right?
No, that's not that's not necessarily true. Because when you look at the components of the universe, they seem to be things that are contingent. And by contingent, I mean they would require an external cause to come into being. So when you look at the analysis of 20th century, I guess you would call it cosmology, with Einstein, Friedman, Lemaitre,
things,
Hubble, all those guys, seems to indicate that there was a time where there was nothing if you draw it all the way down, and then there was something. And so the question at hand is, what's the best explanation for the existence of the universe based on that?
So I'm going to push back really quick and say that's not quite right.
Well, it's an inference for sure.
An inference that not everybody follows, because I think I think it's not okay for people to say before that there was nothing, because number one, there is no before when you start time at t equals 0.
Right.
And to try and apply a concept without that concept being there is silly.
So to say that before the universe began to exist, or before the universe existed, there was nothing, you say that's are you saying that's inconsistent?
Yes, because there's no such thing as before time.
I'm saying that there's I guess I'm just not following where you're going with that.
Sure. No problem. So when you have t equals 0, time equals 0, and then after that, everything that
Before
exists,
that,
the
right.
expansion and all of that, you have after t equals 0.
Yeah.
We understand that time and space, physical matter, all of that is connected. We can see that when we talk about potential energy, and we talk about how we convert a thing's energy. It's all related. It is.
So okay. So do you think that
time is contingent on a universe? There's an integral part of the fabric of that universe.
Okay.
And we have played with those things to the degree that we see how time changes, right? It's not a constant.
Okay.
And you could see that as you near the speed of light. You know, if I put you in a capsule and blasted you out at light speed 5 years and sent you back, you would not have aged as long as the Earth had.
That's true.
That's
so are
amazing.
you saying that the universe is eternal?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're saying the universe does have a beginning?
Well, I'm granting that for this argument. Because
I just want to be clear on that. I didn't know where you're going. I just want to be clear on that.
Absolutely. No worries. I'm granting that because I want to get into some of the juicier stuff here. And in the last conversation, I made the absolute mistake of getting pedantic, and it got boring. And so what I really want to do is I want to dive into the meat. And that is that I don't think you can have time sans universe, or the other way around. And so if the universe is the beginning of time, if we grant that the universe had a beginning, that was when T moved into started working. Okay. Can you have matter without time? No, you cannot. Can you have energy without time? No, you cannot. Because time, matter, and energy, those are the dimensions of things.
Those are the components of the universe, which they seem to be contingent. Right. They're not eternal. They're not necessary.
Well,
they don't exist in and of themselves.
They're contingent on each other. You can convert one into another theoretically.
Right, you can, but I'm saying as far as their origin, their existence, their being.
Well, I mean,
because if
it's also said matter can't be created or destroyed.
But you only get matter can't be created or destroyed once the universe has already been created. Once the universe has already been
Poofed
once the universe is already
whatever happened,
poofed,
the start point.
Yeah, so I don't know that would apply before.
Well, see,
matter exists,
and that's the thing.
Matter can't be created or destroyed if it doesn't exist.
Got it. And what I'm saying is, time as a thing doesn't go backwards before t equals 0.
Time entails change, right? Time is a marker of change, right? So if you go back before that, and there's what's called indifferential time, or maybe some people might even say a different thing, this metaphysical time. You could have a period where there is no universe, but there is no change, right, in the nature of God. So hypothetically, here's the illustration. If somebody hypothetically stood for all eternity, was standing for all eternity, there would be no change there for all of eternity, and then they decided to sit down. That would be a change. So in essence, for the people who would say that God is timeless, there's kind of this dichotomy of, well, if he's temporal, then he's a part of time. If he's timeless, he doesn't exist. And one of the things that
I'm glad you agree with me, by the way.
I'm just saying that's what people say.
That is what I would say.
You could have a God that is timeless before creation, and then enters creation simultaneously with the origin of the universe.
Okay, how would you get to that change? So if time is change, right? If you were to describe it that way, then you would have a perfect static existence. To move out of that static existence would be using your definition of time, which doesn't exist until the instantiation of that universe.
Why couldn't the agent simply make a choice of the will of volition to?
Who said anything to do that about an agent?
Well, we're talking about God, aren't we?
Well,
is God not an agent? I mean,
if you're using the definition Anselm's God, then no, it does not need to have agency.
I don't understand why that would have anything to do with the maximal greatness of God if we're using that definition. I brought it up in the last conversation. I haven't brought it up in this conversation.
That's right. Okay, so maximally great, I think, is a interesting term. I got called out because I called maximal greatness a cop out, and I'll tell you why, because I'll say it directly. I don't mind it. I think maximal greatness is used because people discovered that omnis don't logically make sense. And so it's a good way to say omni without being called out on it.
Okay, well, even if I didn't use the term maximally great, God is still, in the Christian worldview, described as as an agent that has the ability to choose and make decisions. So even if he was timeless, and you had this instance where he was timeless, and then he had the ability to start the clock, so to speak, I don't understand why that would be a problem. If he's timeless before creation and then enters time simultaneously at creation, why that's an issue. Oh no, absolutely. It gets to the premise of you need the creator.
Well, so a couple of things. Number one, if I grant you that God exists, I'm going to quit arguing about whether or not that God exists. So I'm obviously not granting you any of that. No, Number two, the concept. I'm just trying
to solve the problem of timelessness.
Sure. Yeah, because the concept doesn't make sense. You have to use concepts with time to describe what happened when there is no time, because it doesn't work otherwise. Unless you have, but I think we're going to keep retreading this, and I think we just disagree fundamentally, and that's fine. I want to get to why God can't be created. And your description of it has been because God meets several qualities, these maximal qualities.
Right. The description of God in the Christian worldview, and I could even take off the maximal language, just because it can be viewed as a loaded term. Even if I said that God was eternal, even if I said that God was powerful and personal, those are qualities. Those are qualities that within the Christian worldview, it's not up for debate that those are the qualities of God per the Christian worldview based upon how the text of Scripture describes God. So it's not like Christians are simply reaching out and pulling out these nebulous concepts and putting them together and saying, here we go, we've molded and fashioned, what's going on. We're simply saying, all right, how does the text of Scripture describe God? Or he describes God as, okay, he's powerful, he's personal, he's eternal, and therefore those are the descriptors.
Sure. I mean, and powerful and personal can also be said of indigestion.
Sure, there are levels. Sure.
And that's where the maximal piece comes in. Indigestion is a thing that I can point to. What's worse than indigestion? IBS.
Gotcha.
What is maximally in that direction? Apparently God. Right.
Like I said, I've taken the maximal stuff off the table because it's loaded term. So I've taken it off the table. Even though I disagree with your description about that, we can talk about all that stuff at a later time.
Oh, you're killing me! Because it's fun. So here's the thing: is I'm okay talking about the maximal stuff. You don't have to take it off the table because it's what you believe. And the fact that I think it's a cop out is a challenge for you to tell me that I'm wrong, because I want you to show me I'm wrong. All of these conversations.
There's a difference. Well, there's a difference between the maximal island or the maximal pizza, because those are not necessary things. You can always add another grain of sand. You can always add another pepperoni. You could always add another anchovy. Mm-hmm. Right? Those are not great making properties, as they would say.
What is a great making property?
So a great making property would be that which is the highest would be the highest quality that one thing might possess. So for instance, when we say God is omnipotent, right? Or God is omnibenevolent, the quality there would be something like all loving, right? So love is something that agency has that an island does not have.
Wow.
So to say that an island could be maximally great, right? One, it's not necessary. Two, an island isn't an agent. And three, what would a maximally great island look like? You could have an infinite regress of things that could be added to make it better, but there's no great making property there, like say love or knowledge or presence or necessity. It's a contingent thing too.
Okay, so let's look into that, because it sounds like we have a term that was used just so that it can help define God into existence. And I'll give you an example. As you use this, I'm going to hold evil. Okay. And as you, I'd love for you to give me one of those properties and tell me. So how about powerful?
Yeah. What about it?
So, if we were to follow this up, I believe the line of reasoning is, what is the highest conceivable?
Yeah. Highest conceivable being. Yeah.
Well, it's being carries with it a lot of baggage. But if we take these descriptors one at a time, because you have to admit, a maximally powerful, impersonal God has one less quality than a maximally powerful personal God, right?
That a maximally powerful impersonal God has one less quality than a maximally powerful personal God?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Sure. The fewer the qualities you need to prove are things, the more likely it can be.
Well, why would that be the justification for that? That because something has less qualities, it would then be easier to prove?
Sure. If you want me to prove a simple concept to you, as long as it is a simple concept, I can do so. If you want me to prove a complex concept, then I'm going to need to have an understanding of what you accept and what you don't accept. And then I'm going to need to take those things that you don't accept, and I'm going to need to provide sufficient evidence to back up each of those individual things before I can make a claim about the whole.
Right, but even if there are less things to prove, it wouldn't necessarily follow that the thing is more likely to exist.
Well, it definitely lowers your workload.
Well, that doesn't matter. The workload doesn't necessarily matter. Just because something is simpler to describe doesn't mean that it's more likely to exist.
True enough. Okay. So let's start with power.
Okay.
So, why is power baked into this maximal being?
Right. So, I feel like we're talking ontological argument, not Kalam. But anyways,
is it? Oh no, I don't want to go into ontological. Yeah. No.
That's
hold on.
why I took maximal greatness off the table, because that's part of the ontological argument.
Okay.
Not part of the Kalam argument.
No.
The Kalam argument would say that it's a powerful being. Simply says powerful and personal.
Okay.
Right. So
like indigestion.
Sure, there are levels to these things. So when we say that God is powerful, mm-hmm. we're simply saying that that when you look at the first cause, that cause is powerful enough, sufficient enough to bring about the universe. That's simply what we're saying. That's all the Kalam entails. Okay, cool. Is that.
So you have a thing that is sufficient enough to create the universe. Why does it need agency?
Right. Because agency, as far as the beginning of the universe, would be necessary because there are only, and we're going to disagree on this because we disagreed on it. We've disagreed on it before. Because there seems to be only two things that fit into the category of, maybe I would say eternal, or maybe even, I wouldn't say necessary, but eternal would be something like God or something like abstract objects. Abstract objects don't have the power to create anything. Therefore, the only thing that you're left with is would be a agency that had the volition to create or the will to create. Numbers don't have wills. Propositions don't have wills.
And agency does not necessarily have creation power. So there are plenty of things that don't have agency that create. Look at a volcano. If the distinction is, yeah, but that's contingent, that still doesn't answer the statement. Volcanoes don't have agency, and yet they create. So I give you an example of a thing.
I would agree that volcanoes have the ability to create without agency.
Okay.
However, you would have to show then that the beginning of the universe could be created. You would have to show, in the analogy, you would have to show that the beginning of the universe is similar to that of the volcano, and you'd have to provide evidence.
Got it. Okay. That's actually a really, really great point that I'm happy to make. No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
And I'll tell you why.
You certainly do.
No, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because I'm not actually making a statement about the beginning of the universe. I'm bringing up ways that you could be wrong. And so when you're using deductive logic, what you're doing is you're building up a case for that thing and saying, here are the reasons why this is the only option. And so what a skeptic is doing, what a skeptic would do, is say, how could I be wrong? What are other possible explanations? And then how have I picked my explanation out of that lineup? That way I can look to see that I'm not using biased tools. And so when I'm providing these defeaters, I'm not making the statement that a space volcano made the universe. What I am saying is that you didn't account for space volcanoes.
Right.
And
So I'm saying I don't account for space volcanoes because there's no evidence that space volcanoes exist.
right, there's no evidence that
Right.
God exists either.
Right, but God would be different than a space volcano because a volcano in its nature is a contingent being, not necessary.
Okay, if you're going to apply to definitions, then I'm going to take away my granting that a God is contingent or non-contingent or non-net. Like, no.
I mean,
No,
well,
now
you
we're
can't
playing
just say
word
no.
games. Yeah, no,
We're
yeah,
not
I
playing
can.
word
Hold
games.
on a second.
Eric,
So I'm talking about space volcanoes. It is in
talked about this. The core definition of God in the Christian worldview. You're coming and you're asking a Christian apologist.
Yes.
Why does God in the Christian worldview, as a Christian, not need to be created? And I'm saying, in the Christian worldview, God is eternal, and if He's eternal, that means He is necessary. He's not contingent like a volcano is. So the space volcano analogy falls apart because volcanoes, by their very definition, are contingent.
But not
God
space
isn't.
volcanoes. Actually, space volcanoes are eternal. They create universes. They have sufficient power.
Right. So now what you're doing is you're simply adding the properties of the definition of God to space volcanoes. And what you're calling a space volcano is really a redefinition of God.
Without agency.
Sure.
That's
without
the point.
agency. So
That's
then,
the point. Why is agency necessary?
Right. Agency would be necessary because there's no other option on the table.
Space volcanoes.
Right. So you've just arbitrarily made space volcanoes and you said, well, it's God, but it doesn't have agency. Well, it seems to me that when we're talking about the ability to bring the universe into existence, the only two things that could explain the existence of the universe or the origins of the universe is either two options. Either there's the scientific explanation or the personal explanation. The scientific explanation would be something like, if I were to give an analogy, it would be something like when I make chicken nuggets for my daughters. Like, there's a scientific process that takes place that accounts for why the nuggets were cooked the proper way. Or it could be, the other piece was, hey, I put the chicken nuggets as a personal agent into the oven and turned on the oven, and therefore the nuggets were cooked properly, right? So there's the scientific explanation of what caused that, and then there's the personal explanation of what caused that. So unless you have evidence that would suggest that there's some scientific process that could create the world or create the universe,
I think you're
from nothing, then I don't see any other option other than agency.
Sure, got it. That's a false dichotomy, first off.
It's not.
It is. So science is
Things
a process.
either have scientific explanations or personal explanations.
Okay, science is a process. It seeks to describe, it seeks to explore, and it definitely seeks to prove itself wrong as much as it can. The scientific explanation is what we have come up with after we have applied science.
That still doesn't take away
So you're talking about procedure, right? Here's what you do. You open the chicken nugget bag, you preheat the oven, you put the nuggets in, and if you want to be super pedantic, then you're going to have to say you need a person here. It's implied, but a person is going to be necessary to put the nuggets in I can't believe I'm talking about chicken.
Well, no, I'm simply saying,
I love you, Dean. But
so give me something here. You were talking about the origin of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me what do you think are the options that are on the table?
Sure.
For the origin of the universe.
Got it.
And let's take off our best explanation thus far. So
sure. I would feel like a total tool trying to postulate on something that is not in my wheelhouse. But what I will say is, let's go to a operating minimum. Let's see what is minimum. And what I would describe minimum for creation of the universe, if we're agreeing that the universe had a beginning, right? We're agreeing that.
Sure.
So from there, my descriptor would be that which is sufficient for the beginning of the universe.
So what are the specific options on the table for that specific description?
I have no idea. And I'll tell you why.
What's your best guess?
I don't know. I really don't. So here's the thing. I've never created a universe. I don't know anybody who has.
But
and because
Eric,
of that, I can't say.
I wasn't at the Boston Tea Party, but I can give you a rough description of what happened. Right. So I wasn't there at the beginning of the universe, but we have scientific data that suggests we know we know to a good degree that the universe is not eternal.
Sure. I like if you want to talk about our understanding of that, I'm not saying the universe is eternal. I'm not. I'm saying
you made the claim you've never created a universe, and I'm simply saying I don't have to be at a specific event or have some type of experience to understand how something works. Okay, right.
So let's apply your chicken nuggets. Right? So did God go down to the universe store, come back, and then when he got home, he defrosted it,
right?
And then warmed up whatever device is required for popping out universes, and then came out with a fresh baked universe, or
no, of course not. I mean, you're taking the analogy further than what I intended for it to be. I'm simply saying that when you're describing the making of the chicken nuggets, right, or maybe if you were putting on a pot of water, right, there's the scientific explanation for what makes the pot hot. And then there's also the personal explanation for also the personal explanation for how the pot also gets hot, right? There's two explanations on the table.
No, those are exactly the same.
There's a scientific explanation and a personal explanation. If there is no scientific explanation for the origin of the universe, the only thing that you're left with is personal agency.
Hold on a second. So I want you to describe to me without science how you put a kettle of water on to boil.
Right. I'm simply describing the process, right?
But that process requires
go ahead.
Things. If you're saying science is just the water boiling, then guess what? If those are distinct, you don't get boiling water in your personal explanation. Well, you also don't get a pot. You don't get water at all.
What I'm saying, Eric, is that certainly we understand that water can boil without personal agency, right?
Sure.
Okay. So there are instances in nature where water boils without personal agency, right, and there are instances in nature where water can only boil with personal agency. There are options there that are on the table.
Okay. I'm
simply saying, when it comes to the beginning of the universe, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. If there is no data that suggests that the universe is like a situation where water boils without personal agency due to natural forces or scientific procedure, then the only thing left is personal agency.
And
that's what I'm saying.
Okay. How did you discount the former to get to the latter?
With regards to the universe, like why there's not a scientific explanation for the beginning of the universe. Right. Number one, there's a couple of data points from scientific discovery itself. One, you've got second law of thermodynamics. That would be one. I know that that's a big term. Two, the non-existence of an actual infinite. Three, causal finitism. That's a recent proposition by Alexander Proust and Robert Koons.
So hold on. Let's break these down just a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I got carried away.
No worries. What's the first?
So the first one would be the argument from the second law of thermodynamics.
Okay, so that is a scientific explanation talking about entropy.
Right.
Okay,
it's a scientific explanation that talks about entropy, but it shows that the universe is not eternal, right?
I already granted that.
Okay. So then what you have in the second explanation, which was and I already forgot what I said. Second law of thermodynamics.
Well,
the non-existence of an actual infinite, right?
Okay, I'm already granting the beginning of the universe. Like we're already there.
Right.
I'm talking about the nature of that which is sufficient to create a universe. I would go so far as to say that which is sufficient to create a universe. Okay. You're saying that there are all of these other qualities. One of them is agency. I think agency is, and I'm not saying this is you, I'm saying this is the idea as it is presented as particularly hubristic and an easy knockdown. And I think it's an easy knockdown because I don't know how you could possibly see how universes are created with agency and by space volcanoes and compare them to determine which one created ours. Right.
Well, space volcanoes are non-existent because they are volcanoes in and of their nature are contingent. So that is a false analogy unless you just continue to add supernatural qualities to a volcano.
No worries. Okay, so I can actually fix this. Agency is necessarily contingent.
Agency is necessarily contingent. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Show me a disembodied mind.
Right. So when you're talking about a disembodied mind, that's an inductive argument that would only show that minds are connected to brains within humans. It does nothing to show that a disembodied mind doesn't exist.
Well, hold on. So when you make a claim, you're not right, and all the way up until people disprove you. You realize, like, you need to back up your claim, and then people can, talk about what you backed up. But
right, that'd be the conclusion of the Kalam, though.
Right.
Conclusion of the Kalam would be would be an argument for disembodied minds existing.
No, it would not.
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
Absolutely,
it would not. And I'll tell you why. Because it's baked into the definition. If you're baking agency in and saying, well, it's proved by it because it's in its own definition, that is circular logic and it's not acceptable. But each of those things needs to be propped up.
That's not circular within the Kalam, Eric. It's not. It's simply a conceptual analysis on the basis of what's already been shown to be deductively true.
Okay. And I'm telling you, agency cannot be applied reasonably. It can't. It's irrational.
Why?
Because there's not sufficient evidence that a mind can exist outside of a body.
So what is your reference point for minds in general?
Sure. Every mind that has been discovered or studied since we've talked about minds. Like literally every mind is in a body right now. Your mind is in your body. Mine is in mine. Everyone who's watching this, their minds are in their bodies. So I can give you potentially 7 billion if I want to give you human minds. I could also give you animal minds, and we can get some really big numbers up there. How many disembodied minds can you bring to the table?
Right. All I need to bring to the table is one. That's all I need to bring to the table. I don't need to bring 7 billion disembodied minds to the table. I just need to bring one.
Absolutely.
And my first argument for that would be the conclusion of the Kalam. Now, unless you can show, that is the Kalam. But also, it doesn't necessarily follow that because human minds, or the examples that we have of human minds being somehow interconnected with brains, just because that's the case for humans, that just would mean that it's a general property of minds, but not a necessary property of minds.
I disagree.
Okay.
So for you to say it's not a necessary property, you would need to demonstrate that a mind can exist outside of a brain. And your answer, your answer is insufficient. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm asking you to prop up and give me the Kalam. And so for you to say the Kalam answers it, when I'm actually asking you to give me the Kalam and prop up those things that are in the Kalam, appealing to I'm right because it says I'm right, even though I'm asking you to prop that thing up with it. It's circular. You are being circular.
You're asking me. You asked me, okay, what you mentioned something along the lines of, well, you're bringing bring me a disembodied mind to the table. And I said, well, the conclusion of the Kalam is that that wasn't sufficient for you.
No, because I'm asking.
And then I said, hey, we're talking about disembodied minds. Okay, so then we're diving into philosophy of mind with regards to that. And so then the hard problem of consciousness comes into play with regards to that. And then you've got examples in which, unless you can show that the mind and the brain are identical, then Leibniz's law of identity would suggest that minds are not the same as brains, and that minds are non-physical, even if they interact with physical things.
So minds map exactly to discrete brain states every time. We have shown that. We've proven that. Take a person, tell them to think about a dog. Let me hit them over the head with a wrench. They'll stop thinking about the dog. Why? Because they are mapped to each other exactly. In fact, we can see that. So
you're saying that the mind is identical to the brain. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that what we call the mind is a product of having a brain. It is a, what is the term? I'm losing it. It is a emergent property of having a brain. There we go. Emergent property.
Well, let me see if this analogy works. So the hand is the product of having an arm, right? The hand is the product of having an arm. You couldn't have a hand, right? As a person, you couldn't have a hand without having an arm.
I mean,
all things working properly. You couldn't have a hand working.
Okay.
Okay. So
I want to see where this goes.
Okay. So you're saying that a mind is the product of having the brain, right? Well, the hand is the product of having an arm, but those two things are not the same, right?
Well,
the mind is not identical to the brain. So just because the mind interacts with the brain, it doesn't mean that those two things are identical. They're still different.
No, I just told you they're identical. I just said they're identical, and it's an emergent property of the brain, right? The brain was not evolved to have a mind in it. A brain was evolved to survive, and being able to communicate increased that likelihood of survival. Being able to understand things and conceptualize things also drastically increased the likelihood of survival. And the emergent property that comes from those things is what we call the mind. But to say that the mind is something outside, like some ghost in the machine, we're not even going to get to the physical and non-physical properties of whether or not minds exist, because I can tell you definitively that every mind that we have studied has come from studying a brain, or a living brain. If you don't have a brain, you don't have a mind. That is every case. Like, that is case closed. To open that case is to need to say, hey, I have evidence of brains existing outside of minds, and then pointing that towards the God concept.
So if those two things, if the mind and the brain are identical, which you have clearly affirmed that they're the same.
Yes.
If they do brain surgery on me tomorrow and crack open my skull, where are they going to find my thoughts? Where can they physically, tangibly touch my thoughts?
Got it. So are you conscious?
Huh?
Are you conscious?
Does it matter?
Yes, it does.
I can still dream and have thoughts running through my head while I'm unconscious.
Sure.
I? So where do I access that? Where do they physically touch? Where do they physically dig in my brain and say, I found Dean's dream about being in the Bahamas. It's right here.
Absolutely. So from what we've discovered about studying brains, we see that we access different parts of our brains that store these things electrochemically. It's through connections between neurons. So I can take and image your brain at that moment and see the activity within it. And if I had the ability to study your brain enough to find where those things were mapped, I could probably come up with a really pretty good idea of what it is that you're thinking of. And I do think that we can continue to study that to the point that we can get there. Now, brains, as your neurons connect, as your synapses are firing, your brain is different from my brain. So those are not the same because they are changing constantly. But we're talking about your brain, and I'm not going to stop by saying, hey, we have limitations right now, because the concept is solid. The concept is that the discrete brain state, right? And I'm including all of the electrochemical activity in that brain that maps to what you are thinking, what you are feeling, and how your brain is diagnosing that whatever's going on in your body at that moment, that discrete brain state. If I were to stop time and look at it, that's where it is.
But the problem with what you've said is that is the mapping of the chemicals that are firing in my brain. It's not accessing it's not accessing or telling me discreetly, oh, right now, Dean is unconscious, and currently what's going on is he's dreaming about a vacation in the Bahamas. Right.
So that's a qualia argument.
Huh?
That's a qualia argument.
Well, if they're the same, if you're saying that minds and brains are the same, then they are identical. Mm-hmm. The law of Leibniz's identity, they are identical. X equals Y and Y equals X. They're the same. So when you crack open my brain and you're looking, you might be able to map the chemicals that are firing in my brain, but there's no way you could access the specific dream that I'm having. Right. You might say, okay, it's over in this area of the brain, and that area of the brain usually deals with, in general, X. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that he's dreaming it's clearly that he's dreaming in this sphere, but you can't access that first person perspective of that dream. Just like we're talking right now. That you're thinking something right now, mm-hmm. and I'm thinking something right now, but I have no access to your thoughts. Those are first person perspective things that only you know about. And
you just made
that's
qualia
different than the brain state.
You just made qualia. That is what you just did. You just argued qualia. The experience of a thing, the lived experience of a thing, you're saying is something distinct and different from those things that describe that experience. So if I say Dean had a spicy burrito, I can describe it. I can describe the burrito. I can describe the way it tastes in your mouth. I can describe the way it absolutely wrecked you because you should have paid a couple extra bucks for a better burrito later on.
In Austin, Texas.
But hey, you had some good food.
Austin, Texas, not North Carolina.
Yeah, you had some good food in Texas, man.
No doubt.
I was there. That said, me describing all of those things is not the experience of you doing those things. And what I'm saying is that is a non-argument.
That's not a non-argument because you've made the statement that the mind and the brain are the same. Mm-hmm. So you would have to show that these two things are identical. And you've said that they are. And I'm simply showing an example where when it comes to things like thoughts, when it comes to things like maybe even a self-reflection or consciousness, these things are not simply brain states. They're products of minds, and that minds and brains are not identical.
Okay, so
if you've said that they're identical, you have to show that they are.
Absolutely. The way you do that is by applying the scientific method. And what we want to do in applying the scientific method is try to falsify that and then see if we can recreate that in a way that can prove that hypothesis wrong. So here's how we would do it. The statement would be the mind is an emergent property of the brain and its functions are described as X. And so if the mind is something that worked independent of the brain, then we should be able to remove those things that the brain has to offer and still have the mind pieces. And so that's where you get to disembodied, right? Thus far, we have not yet found any of those things, because if you're talking about a feeling, what you're talking about is the subjective experience of those chemicals, those electrochemical reactions in your brain doing their job and sending things, good feelings. So you've got, dopamine, you've got epinephrine or norepinephrine. So,
I don't know how to say it, man.
You've got all the feel-good chemicals. Those are all things. That is why you feel that way. That is a descriptor of the feeling. Now, if you're saying that the feeling itself is something other than what you're describing, then you're talking about a non-tangible, non-studyable. You're saying that something exists, but in trying to describe it, all you're doing is giving the evidence I'm trying to give you. And so I don't know how that's any different. Try to describe what you're talking about. Try, because every step along the way, the only terms you have to give me are the terms I'm giving back to you that describe what's going on.
Right. So what I'm trying to accomplish is to show that because minds and brains are not identical, it at least opens up the door for the possibility of an unembodied mind, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that there's this piece of who we are as humans, right? That we're not just the rearrangement or arrangement of molecules and matter in motion. There's another piece to us that is non-physical. We're not
Why?
Carbon composites. Because if I can show, and this is my logic, and you can tell me where I'm wrong.
Sure.
If I can show that the mind and the brain are not identical, then it opens up the door for the potential that unembodied minds are possible as we navigate through that.
Agreed. And I gave you a very solid no.
I know you do. I completely agree with that, and that's and I think that's the brunt of the discussion. That if the mind and the brain are not identical, it opens up the possibility that at least that piece of the Kalam is true.
And that is the argument that I was hoping for, because that right there is you propping up a piece that is baked into Kalam.
It's not okay. It's not baked into the Kalam because
can we have Kalam without agency?
Huh?
Can we have Kalam without agency?
Talking about the personal part is baked. I guess I need a definition of what you mean by baked in.
Sure. So if I were to take the descriptors of that God in the Kalam cosmological argument as given by William Lane Craig and removed a piece of it, it would no longer be that argument. It would be something similar, but it would not have that piece. And so if I were to pull personal out, or if I were to pull agent, having agency out, if I were to pull necessary out or powerful out, any of those things would change what that argument was. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to methodologically approach this and go, okay, let's look at each of the qualities that are asserted and then see if those things are necessary, because that which is sufficient to create a universe, I don't think that agency is necessary. I don't think that more power than creating. So what's more powerful than that which can create a universe? Something that can create two universes? Maybe that's something that can survive having created that universe. If we are talking about a living thing.
Okay. Well, I've pressed you multiple times to provide for me something that would be a non-agent that's capable of bringing about the universe, and I've referenced it as a scientific explanation, and you've said, well, we don't need agency for the universe, and then I've asked you, hey, what are the options that are on the table, and you've either said space volcanoes or I don't know.
So
my point is like where, if agency isn't on the table and you said space volcanoes and I don't know, then how do I access what Eric Murphy, his best guess outside of I don't know to what he thinks is the explanation of the universe without agency? I really would like to know that, because all I've gotten is space volcanoes and I don't know.
Absolutely. The point is to say that you're not justified in making the statement that you're making. And to posit one, let me give you an example. You and I are standing outside of a pharmacy and someone is very sick, right? And so you and I go to the pharmacy. Neither of us are pharmacists. I grab a bottle of pills off the counter and I say, here's what I'm going to give this sick person. So are you going to grab another bottle of pills that you have no idea about and go, well, now I've got something to argue with? Or are you going to say, Eric, are you justified in your assertion that that's the right thing? Because I need to know, I want to evaluate the evidence that you have that's making you so confident that this is the right thing. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at what you have prescribed as the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, my bottle of pills.
Your bottle of pills is this God description.
That's not good enough.
I'm saying, how have you evaluated it? Are there other bottles of pills? And what I've done with space volcanoes is I've given an example of what another bottle of pills could look like. But ultimately, I'm not actually coming up and saying, hey, here is my bottle of pills that I think is correct. What I'm saying is, I don't think you have the qualifications or justification in any way, and I don't think any of us do, at least not yet, to prescribe what you're prescribing.
Right. And my pushback to that is, one, obviously, I think I've got the right bottle of pills, and I'm also pressing you to say, and I will be a little blunt, because
do it.
You're my boy.
Do it.
I think the reason that you won't give that to me is because I think you know that the explanations that are on the table, as far as the scientific explanation of the universe and not the personal explanation of the universe, that all of those things are baked into the universe, so that as to posit them as an explanation of the universe would be the ultimate, as Daniel Dennett says, the ultimate bootstrapping trick, that the universe just created itself, or that the universe came from nothing uncaused. And I think that you don't want to give me that explanation, because you see the pitfall in that explanation. So it's just easier to say, all right, I'm going to sit back and I don't know, space volcanoes and your bottle of pills sucks.
Right. Right. And really the thing is I recognize the hubristic nature of trying to come up with something that I don't have evidence for, because why would I do that? I'm not trying to say I know how the universe was begun. If we're granting that the universe began, you are. And so to say, Eric, my stuff is more likely because you can't think of a better one?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that mine is better than yours because you don't have it.
Or that I have a competing hypothesis and without one you win de facto. Like,
I'm not making that claim either.
Okay.
I'm simply saying that I feel like I'm justified because I do think that the bottle of pills that I have is good. I'm just coming and saying, okay, well, if agency is off the table, and you're saying agency is not responsible for the existence of the universe, right? I'm simply asking the question, okay, Eric, if agency is off the table, then outside of I don't know, what do you think is the best scientific guess currently in peer review that would explain that? Or what is your personal opinion about what you think might be the best explanation?
Well, so we can do two things. We can look at this inductively or deductively. So we can apply logic, as we're doing as armchair quarterbacks, to the universe, which is wonderful. I call it professional navel gazing. I want to be a professional for the rest of my
There
life.
you go.
I think it's wonderful. Or we can go study it, and bring in data, right? So if I were looking at the description and I wanted to make it the best possible description, the most, rigorously tested, then by saying, is agency necessary? What I'm doing is going, okay, if agency is not necessary for the beginning of the universe, or the creation of the universe, or whatever we want to call it, then I don't want to take on the extra baggage of that, because there is extra baggage there that is not necessary. If we're just talking about the instantiation of the universe, then I want what is sufficient, not a whole bunch of extra stuff on top of that. I want to zero it down to what is sufficient. Okay. Because that gives us our baseline.
Right.
And
so, okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay. What I'm saying is, in your description, I'm giving you what I would do. This is my process. This isn't me trying to be contradictory. I'm applying my process to your hypothesis. And in doing so, I'm saying, here's a piece. This piece, I don't think is necessary for this sufficient creator. And I'm giving you that evidence. So in doing so, what I really want you to do is I really want you to take agency out of the description in Kalam, unless you can show that agency is there.
Right. So I see what you're saying.
Okay, good. I'm trying so hard.
I know I've attempted to do that, but I'm still, left in a quandary with regards to, the other piece of the puzzle of this, which is, if I'm mistaken about the origin of the universe and the hypothesis that I've put forward is the wrong one, I'm simply coming back to Eric and saying, okay, well, what do you think is currently the best hypothesis?
Got it.
Right. I'm not asking that because for any other reason than I'm just curious as to say, okay, this hypothesis isn't working. You disagree with it. You don't think it's justified. What do you think is the best guess? And I've yet to get an answer outside of, and I've even taken, let's just take, I don't know, off the table. Let's just say Eric's best guess at what is the best explanation for the origin of the universe.
I'm going to give you an answer you're not going to like.
I know you are.
So here's my answer. And we're on an hour already. So
we are.
Yeah. So here's what I want to say, Dean. That is a golden opportunity. That is the opportunity that we have to explore this amazing universe that we're in. And I highly suggest to anybody to explore it, to dive in, and to add to the accumulated knowledge that we have as we continue to learn about it. What I would do is I would turn that into a call to increase STEM funding, a call to tell people, hey, you don't need a certain belief structure to find wonder in the world. That right there is enough of a source of wonder to keep me going for the rest of my life. And that is the answer. The answer isn't what is your current hypothesis. My answer is let's learn together, because that one's not working. Okay. That's my answer.
So you're not gonna be like, you're not gonna say,
I gave you the most kumbaya answer possible, man.
It was a good.
Yeah.
But because you're my friend, and because this isn't just a rando moment or a rando show where I'm talking to somebody that I don't know, let's take it off Kalam real quick. Sure. And I know we're already at an hour, and I'll go as long as you want to. Right now.
I want to keep it. I want to keep it down to as low as I can past an hour. That's
fine. And this could be even a separate.
I would be down. Discussion. Let's give them a taste. Yeah, dude, come on, give me an opportunity to talk to you. What do we got?
So this is kind of I think my issue with skepticism, and I don't mean it in a negative way. I think that skepticism, tamed skepticism, as I like to say, is a good thing. I think that skepticism about the way the world works is necessary. I think that it is provided, whether that's in the realm of theology or in the realm of science and history, every aspect of life, there are reasons why we should be skeptical and seek out answers. But it's in instances in the conversation that we're having where I understand that the burden of proof is on me to justify the claim. I get that. But also in that dialogue, if you're telling me that what I have is not justified and is not good, and then the answer that when I say, okay, well, hey, if I'm wrong, what do you think the best explanation about this is? What I find maybe even a little frustrating with skeptics, it's like, I don't know, but I know that your justification is wrong. Sure. And I'm not going to give you anything that I think about, whether it's the universe, whether it's morality, whether it's, in things about the resurrection. What I see in a lot of skeptics, and what I think I've seen here, whether it's intentional or not, I think it's unintentional, is I'm going to sit back and I'm going to poke holes in what you've got. But the minute that you ask me
to bring something to the table, I'm going to say, I'm not going to bring anything to the table. And I think that's just jacked up, man. So I get what you're saying, and I've heard it, and you have been very charitable in your description of your frustration. I get that. So
explain to me how that aspect of skepticism is beneficial to, I guess, inquiry towards
absolutely
truth.
I would love to.
Go ahead.
I would love to. So for that, we have to go back to Descartes,
right?
The father of skepticism, who's been rolling in his grave ever since, because the entire reason he did that thought experiment was to disprove skepticism. And in his breakdown of things, he got all the way down to, I could be dreaming, I could be mad, I could be,
I could have a demon controlling me.
Well, and that's the end of that piece is, well, what if I'm wrong about mathematics? What if I'm supernaturally being
manipulated by a demon?
And that takes on something that came before, Socratic questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And Socratic questioning
got him killed.
Well, if he lived at all, he was accused of sophistry. But anyway.
That's another question. You think Socrates didn't live? Go ahead. Anyway,
I think at this point it doesn't matter.
True. All right, go ahead.
So
I'm interested.
Okay,
I'm laid back.
Got it. In Socratic questioning, the purpose that Socrates had in doing that was to let people know who were living in a society that weren't questioning the way things were going. Why? Why are things the way they are? Mm-hmm. Have we really investigated this? And if we haven't, then are we doing things for bad reasons? And so he took on the view that every 3-year-old gets. I'm sure your dad, maybe it's 2. What age do they start saying why?
Oh, geez. 2 to 3.
Okay. And eventually you get down all the way down to I don't know. You ask why long enough, you're going to get down to I don't know.
Okay.
There are a lot of base assumptions that we have about things, so we should challenge them. But the core of it is I don't know, and it's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable that he was killed for it. In fact, it has a name. It's aporia, and it sucks. It sucks so much that Martin Luther King used that. That's why he compared himself to a gadfly. Stinging, it's what it's doing is it's using this discomfort to move the horse, to say, hey, where is society going in this direction and why? This uncomfortability is a tool that we can use to move toward progress, because so long as we are questioning our base assumptions about things, we can make sure that we're not picking up some ridiculous crap along the way. And if we do, we try and get rid of it as soon as we can.
Yeah.
And so is skepticism its own framework? In this way, it's not. In this way, it is just a tool. And so I do have base assumptions. I also assume that I'm not in the matrix. I assume that you are another person.
It's properly basic.
You have that conversation with V today. It's actually almost today. You have that conversation with V today, and then we'll talk. But these are baseline assumptions that I want to challenge, because I want to make sure that what I'm running on doesn't have a whole bunch of extra stuff that's not warranted. And so I'm taking that and applying it to the God belief. Why? Because if I'm wrong and if you're right, that needs to be the purpose for everyone to get there. It would need to be the reason, right? I mean, I'm going to quote the Bible to you. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever so believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life.
Right.
That
I agree.
is something I would absolutely adore to have.
Fair enough.
Let's make sure that we're not blowing steam, that we're not blowing smoke up each other's butts, and let's make sure that claim actually has backing.
Yeah.
Because I could say, Dean, I'm going to give you $1 million tomorrow if you do all of this stuff tomorrow. And I get you to mow the lawn, I get you to paint the house, all of that. And when the time comes and I don't give you that $1 million, you're going to feel pretty cheated.
No, I get that aspect of skepticism. My fear about skepticism, and I'll be more direct, specifically within certain elements of the atheist community, I think has a potential to be
atheist community. That's my jammy jams.
Has the potential to be, how do I want to say it? I think it's problematic in that I don't have a problem with Socratic questioning. My issue is that it almost comes to a point of like trying to pin Jell-O to a wall with a nail, right?
That's a great example. Yeah.
So if we're discussing and I'm saying, hey, it is, or even if I frame, and I didn't frame it in our discussion about the Kalam, but I could certainly frame it in other areas. Hey, it's more probable than not that God created the universe, right? And you say, I don't think you're justified in saying that. I don't think you're justified in saying that it's more probable than not that God created the universe. And here are all the problems with that. Okay, well, what is there to compare it to, or the multiple things to compare it to see whether or not it is more probable than not? And my issue is, and I don't mean to pick on you, but it's
dude, hit me, come on, man.
And it's in general.
You're recording with me at midnight.
That's
because
fine.
The footage got lost after we had a great conversation.
Yeah, no, that's
hit
fine.
Me.
And so my issue is, it seems to me, and tell me where I'm wrong, it seems to me that modern skepticism is one of which the onus obviously is on the person who makes the claim to say, hey, God exists. All right, you've got to prove it. But when one says, I don't think God does exist, or I don't think that you're right in your assessment that it's more probable than not that God exists. As soon as it seems to me, as soon as the theist wants to flip it to the atheist, okay, well, justify the claim why you believe or why you think that it's less probable that God exists than does exist, or you don't believe that God exists, or you don't believe that God or agency is needed for the creation of the universe. All right, well, hey, justify that claim. It seems like what comes back is, oh, well, I'm just going to sit here and say, I don't know, because I understand that if I do say, like Dennett says, the universe created itself, there's problems with that. And you're a smart enough guy. I mean, I hate this. I don't want this to be like an intervention or anything. But
No.
You're a smart enough guy to know the theories that are out there with regards to the beginning of the universe.
So the question, what I love about this is how many apologists and counter apologists are able to have this conversation. And I'm just gonna, I'm tired. It's been a long day. and look, depending on what the claim is. So if it is about a God that has characteristics that I think can't exist, I'll make the statement that God doesn't exist. I believe that God doesn't exist, and I can provide enough evidence to show that God can't exist logically. I've done it before. The omni-God has been done for hundreds of years, the disproof of that. That's solid. That God cannot possibly exist. It just can't. And so if we want to go down that road, so long as I feel comfortable that, hey, you know what? Here's a claim, and I really do think I have something to add to the table. That omni-God description is a bad one. And I want to take that out of your toolbox because I think your toolbox is made better by not having it in there. And if you say maximal, that is still better than omni. You know? And every step along the way, it does sound like I'm being contrarian, and it does sound like I'm being a jerk, but I'm wanting to strengthen you. I am wanting to strengthen the tools that you have to investigate. And so I am making a positive claim. Omni-God does not exist. Right. I can defend that, and I can provide evidence.
Well, my point isn't even omni-God or maximal. I'm simply saying, when we're talking about the origin of the universe, specifically in our Kalam conversation, my frustration is that as I'm trying to justify the claim, you're saying agency is not required for the universe to begin to exist. That's essentially your claim. Agency, you don't need it for the universe to begin to exist. And so then I retort and I say, okay, so if agency isn't required, Eric, then what is your best explanation of a universe that comes into being without agency, right? And I know you well enough. You're a smart enough guy to know the multiple theories that are out there with regards to the beginning of the universe.
Absolutely. And
right. And so, but here's my point.
Sure.
So I pressed and I said, okay, well, give me something to work with. If you're seeking to sharpen that and this isn't a good tool, well, give me something to compare that to in lieu of poking holes in it.
Right.
And it seems like you were just not willing to give that to me.
Well, because I don't have one. I'm applying that tool equally. And to each of them, you and I have talked about the multiverse. I disagree strongly. And I'm using that tool equally. I'm not being just mean to the apologist on that. I'm being mean to everybody equally. That said, the reason I focus on the God question is because the multiverse theory doesn't lead to holy wars, you know, and that's what I think makes this conversation so darn important. I understand me not bringing something to the table on that is frustrating, and my counter is one that I feel like atheists and skeptics need to have along with their skepticism, because skepticism does not give you what that answer is. And that answer, to me, what I'm telling you, that feeling of aporia, that is eureka. That is discovery. And that is that healthy dose of wonder that we need alongside the skepticism. And I think if we had that, if you encountered that more, you wouldn't have that feeling. Because we should be darn excited every time we learn we don't know something. And we don't know a lot.
Well, it's not the Eric. It's not the issue of not knowing something. It's the issue of you made the claim, and I don't want to sound like the whiny little brat that didn't get the cookie at the end of dinner. My issue is, so you make the claim, agency is not required for the universe to come into existence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the answer, the retort is, all right, Eric, justify that claim. Why is agency not needed for the beginning of the universe why is agency not needed for the universe to come into being? Right. And the answer is, from what I got tonight, was, I don't know. I just know that it's not.
So I can answer that. Agency is not required because, to the best of my knowledge, there were no bodies to contain agency at the beginning of the universe.
So let me ask you this. Is it, and this is just something I'm throwing out there.
Sure.
I have not even begun to run down this road theologically.
Okay.
Would it be, let me think. Would it be possible for, and I'm not saying hold to this position, would it be possible for God, well, I know you probably disagree with that too, to have a non, what's the word I'm looking for?
Free will?
No, not free will. A non-corporeal body, but still have some type of, I guess we'd be looking at like spiritual bodies, stuff like that. Anyways, that's just a random tangent.
Okay. That's okay. So I would love to be wrong about a lot of these. The reason I'm saying agency isn't because I don't know. The reason I'm saying not agency is because every time we study agency, it is inextricably linked to and synonymous with
right
the fact that it is an emergent property of having a brain.
Okay. And that's kind of where we went, and we talked about, the mind brain deal. And you were like, hey, the mind and the brain are identical. So I guess my follow-up question would be, well, let me let you finish. This is your show. I'm not the.
That's okay. Reviewer. Yeah. You pulled another half hour out of me, my friend.
I'm sorry.
This happens every time we talk. For people who are watching, this is what Dean and I do all of the time.
1:30 to 5:30 last time we were together in Austin.
Yeah.
And he had just picked me up. He didn't even know me that well. He just picked me up and we just started talking. We
got along like that.
We did.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just want to ask one question. So if there were sufficient evidence to show that the mind and the brain were not identical, would that change your position on agency?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And specifically, the brain is not the mind. It's the discrete brain state for each of those things. So the discrete brain state that maps to my thoughts now is going to be different from the discrete brain state that maps to my thoughts 5 minutes from now. And so if I'm pointing at the brain, I'm really not getting an accurate representation of it. But in that time, the discrete picture of that moment does map to my thoughts, my feelings, my things that aren't even under my control, like regulation of my body.
So essentially then what you're saying is, and this is a different topic, you're saying that you are just a series of brain states.
Mm-hmm. Ask me if you think ask me if I think I have free will.
I know you don't think that you have free will.
We're meat robots, Dean.
we're just wet robots, as Frank Turk would say.
That's right. All right, buddy. All right. So I'm going to close this out.
Like go for it.
All right.
Fun.
I'm going to meet you and I'm going to come right back to you. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So that was my conversation with Dean. I have got to say, I adore the guy. I love talking to him. It's fun. And if you are watching this channel, you're going to see him plenty more times, because I think that so long as we have platforms, we should prop up people who are exemplifying good conversations and treating each other well. And, you know, I want him to study, and I want to study more too, because I think that despite the different goals that we have, we are still sharpening each other. And I think we both agree, and I know that he wouldn't be upset, especially because I can still see him, that whatever conclusion we come to, it should be for the right reasons. Yeah, he's nodding. All right. That said, I want to thank my patrons. This has been amazing, and I can't wait to see where we go from here. If you've looked around the channel in the last couple episodes, you'll see that things are changing and it's getting better, and I'm excited about it. Thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to support me, you can go to patreon.com/Eric Murphy. I'm going to be putting up things around this video. So here's what I'm going to try. This is my challenge to myself, because this video needs to go out today. Click here, right here. Yeah, let's do this right here. Click here to subscribe. Click here to check out my new series, Murphy's Law, where I break down videos, calls to the various talk shows. And how about right here? I'll put the playlist for other conversations I've had. No, you know what? I'm going to put the very first conversation I had with Dean, which is the first thing I put on this channel. That said, take care. Bye, everybody.